Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle Me in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. I'm going to do another filler video in one of the empty spaces I created in the earlier part of this series, Freemasonry and Satanism. When I reorganized my videos, I'm trying to have a complete series up to 150 by the end of this year. So I had to select some books that I read back in 2013, 2014 to fill into those slots. Anyways, this one should be rather interesting. Astrology. I've done mysticism, the Kabbalah, Satanism, Communism, Zionism, Freemasonry, Rosicrucians, UFOs, aliens, and so much more. Occult history. So it's only about time I talk about astrology. What do you believe? You read your daily horoscope? Do you know your birth sign? Do you know your natal chart? We'll talk about it. Astrology, the space-age science. Series number 41. Here at last is the book that dares to reveal the secrets of the ages, the startling lost wisdom of the ancients. Here at last is the book that takes you behind the scenes to reveal new discoveries about Atlantis, visitors from other planets, and the extrasensory powers of the mind. And here, at least, is the book that reveals the future history of the world right up to the year 2010 AD, as predicted by some of the greatest thinkers and prophets of all times. Well, this ought to be an interesting conversation, you think? So I can only do part one right now. I can't do the whole book. I like to pick a certain section and read from it and have a conversation as I read through it. And for today's video, it'll be chapter 3, the world's oldest secrets. And you can see that I highlight stuff. I pre-read numerous chapters recently after reading this book in its entirety years ago. You can see all my tabs there. But when I was reading years ago, before I started making videos, I didn't have the technique perfected where I highlight stuff. So when I'm reading, I know what I want to focus on. So the world's oldest science. Astrology has influenced all men of all ages. It is a fact of historical record that it is the foremost intellectual movement of all time. It predates all other sciences, all political systems, and all religions. It is older than the Great Wall of China, the Egyptian pyramids, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the temples of Greece, the tablets of the ancient Babylon, or the Ark of the Covenant. Wow. Joseph Goodavage, however you say his name. That's quite the statement there. Astrology crosses every intellectual level of every society of every age, and it attracts the greatest minds of all cultures, regardless of the prevailing religion or the incumbent political system. It is the cornerstone of which education, religion, law, and science, in short, civilization, are built. The world's greatest knowledge, astrology, influenced the Arabs, the Greeks, the Hindus, the Romans, the Chinese, and the Egyptians. It influenced the believers of Muhammad, the followers of Christ, and all the ancient Americans, the Aztecs, the Toltecs, the Incas, the Mayans. The believers in the Platonic eons, and those who subscribe to the mores and manners of Confucius. Astrology fascinated Stoics in togas, mystics in robes, the popes of the Middle Ages, and the contemplative Buddhists, the prophets and holy men who wrote the Old and New Testament, as well as Hippocrates, the father of medicine. It influenced Catholic saints, Jewish seers, the Caesars of the 2nd century, the Arabs of the 6th century, the founders of Rome, and the intellectuals of Greece. Totalitarian dictators, American presidents. I guess Reagan or his wife were into astrology, and so were many others. Wall Street brokers and space-age scientists. Critics like to claim astrology is discredited, but they can't explain why the founders of the new cosmology believe in astrology. The real reasons have no relation to those who usually hear. Fact versus fancy. They were not really believers in astrology. It was only an amusing sideline, a hobby. It's what people say. This author says, not so. They were neither dabblers nor hobbyists. These are famous people throughout the history, but dedicated full-time practitioners of the ancient system. It was the life work of Kepler, the scientist. He labored over his laws in order to perfect his astrological predictions. Newton's primary interest was astrology. It was the problems posed by the astrological influence which caused him to investigate light and gravity. Astrological influence. So as I was reading this, it made a little bit of sense. Astrological influences. And now they're bringing out the 5G microwave communication network. It's supposed to permeate every bit of our world with all these short microwaves and connect everything. I suppose that would have some kind of an electromagnetic influence, and astrological influences are seemingly related to electromagnetic influences. Even the moon, a lot of people are aware, that's when a lot more people go crazy or wind up in hospitals during full moons or new moons. So if they're bringing out this new 5G, and maybe they've already changed electromagnetic influences on our planet with the HARP transmitters located strategically all over the world, and of course all the cell phone towers, satellites in space, wireless systems, the 60 hertz electric grid, and so much more. And if they're studying the effects of these electromagnetic and astrological cosmic influences, knowing that they can actually change the ion count in the atmosphere or in an area, or the polarity in the ground with Gwen towers, they have been studying this. I've talked about it. You can look it up. But they can change the mood, the emotions of whole groups of people, even making them go insane, get enraged, riot. So somebody's trying to bring about this new world order, new age, and having control over people and the weather and so much more, animals, insects, temperatures. These are tools in the tool bag for these new agers, new world order elites who have designs to create some kind of aristocratic world where the rest of us are either dead or enslaved. Just saying, you think about astrological influences throughout the ages. If it's real and it's used by Wall Street brokers and space-age scientists, American presidents, did it predict wars and other chaos, catastrophic events? So they were living in superstitious ages ago. Therefore, they were superstitious men. Wrong again. These men broke. Gotta get started on my speaking. Sorry. These men broke with all traditional natural philosophy and established their own on the basis of scientific truths they discovered and proved. They were not superstitious in any ordinary sense. In other excuses, they were rebellious. They were religious. You can't be religious and objective. Religion weakened their intellectual discipline. That doesn't work either. They were devout Christians, but modern astronomy and physics also include devout Christians who, without study or investigation, do not believe in astrology. Another excuse is they were forced by the wealthy to cast horoscopes in order to make a living and continue their astronomical researches. Wrong. A lot of these scientists back then and famous people were financially solvent. The uncle of Corpinius was a sovereign bishop who provided him with a generous lifelong allowance. Kepler was married to a landed and wealthy widow. Galileo was a well-to-do professor of mathematics. Newton lived in London in a London palace and made contributions at that time. He worked out his views on astrology. Unfortunately, it has taken over 300 years for his astrological ideas to receive the serious scientific consideration they are now receiving. So a little introduction here. How the discoveries of Corpinius affect you. By the time he was 39 years old, the great astronomer Nicholas Copernicus was learned in medicine, theology, mathematics, astronomy, and Greek. He was the personal physician to his uncle, the Bishop Prince of Ermidland Diocese. When the bishop died, Copernicus took over the diocese during several emergencies and personally supervised the defense which drove off hordes of Teutonic knights and later Polish occupational troops. He was nothing if not versatile. His use of the cannon and strategic warfare made him famous as a soldier, commandant, and a mathematician. When peace returned, Copernicus was a hero. Like veterans of later campaigns, he resumed his education and studied medicine, astronomy, and history, for he was intrigued by the great minds of the Greek and Egyptian era. He was fascinated by the astronomical knowledge and the use of astrology. But he did not blindly accept the theories of men like Milton, Pythagoras, Aristotle, Ptolemy, all of whom were astrologers. Skeptical, doubting, but always inquiring, he questioned their astrological conclusions every step of the way. Another little topic here, medical astrology. Pythagoras, the Greek philosopher astrologer, born in 572 BC, so what's that, 772 years ago, 572 years before Christ, lived a century before Milton and was generally credited for discovering that the earth was a sphere. By the time of Aristotle, 384 to 322 BC, this concept was not only well established among the scholars of that period, but also was known long before this to be the most ancient peoples on the planet, as we'll show later. So the ancients even knew that the earth was a sphere. And of course, a lot of people talk about the flat earth theory. Copernicus, as a doctor, was stimulated by the ideas of Hippocrates, the father of medicine, who stressed purposeful creation. Purposeful creation. Hippocrates was an authority on diagnosis and treatment of disease deduced from astronomical correlations. Wow. In fact, the famous Hippocratic crises are based on the hexagon angles of the moon's monthly motion, in the case of fevers, disease, and even surgical operations. Copernicus confirmed these crises by his own mental expertise. This timing is still observed by modern medical men who seem to have forgotten their celestial origin. Hippocrates taught that there was an astronomical correspondence for every known rhythm, period, or cycle of time, whether applied to the earth or to the life upon it. Born 800 to 2,000 years before the Greeks, the Egyptians already knew the connection between the different parts of the body and the signs of the zodiac. The Babylonians, the Chaldeans knew it before the Egyptians, and the Sumerians knew it before the Chaldeans or the Phoenicians. Knowledge of incredible antiquity. It was then a matter of established record that the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Chaldeans, the Sumerians possessed superior skills in the sciences, medicine, and philosophy than the Greeks, who themselves admitted this by the fact that their most distinguished philosophers traveled to Memphis and Babylon to study geometry, astrology, and astronomy. Those fragments of science and wisdom gathered by Thales, Pythagoras, and Democritus, which was absorbed by the Greek culture, belonged to a once mighty system. The truth is that astrology, the pharaoh of modern science, was the keystone of this system. The Chaldeans deduced a cycle in the affairs of men and nations called Saros, which consisted of 3,600 years. So they have this thing back then, a cycle in the affairs of men called Saros, which consisted of 3,600 years. And they're saying now with this planet X that its return is every 3,600 years. And apparently they're saying it is now imminent. Even some saying September 23rd, 2017, 18 days away. And a lot of other weird stuff is going on in the news right now. Do you believe what's going on in the news? They've been building up and building up on North Korea, now saying he just tested his 5th nuclear explosion. The way I understand it, he's been testing rockets. It's a small country. I believe, this is my thoughts, and this is still America, and we have the right to free think and free speech. But I think it's all part of a staged plan to bring us into World War III, some kind of world catastrophe. Martial law, the New Age, New World Order, the preparations are being made everywhere, including the new 5G network, as well as Jade Helm 15 in 2015. All the FEMA camps, which some are apparently being used now after the Texas hurricane. Of course, we have another hurricane heading for Florida right now. So can they control the weather? Are they bringing everything to a head? And there's a lot of other crazy stuff in the news. Makes you wonder. So the planet X is coming. It looks like World War III is coming. Looks like some kind of world catastrophe is coming. And they're worried about sustainability and biodiversity for the last 70, 80 years, preparing for something. What is operating behind the scenes? And they have remote viewers and all kinds of technologies they've been developing in black projects, even selling cocaine, heroin, and drugs to the American people, as well as stock market manipulation, bombing the smithereens out of all the towns and cities in the Middle East. They created 911, the inside job to do it. There's just too many coincidences. So let's get back to astrology. Could all this have been predicted? Was it all predicted? So it says here, and I was amazed to be reading this, as well as many other things in this book we'll see, that just were too much of a coincidence. So they had a 3,600 year cycle, and apparently Planet X, Nibiru, is a 3,600 year cycle. They're talking about an alien invasion, Project Bluebeam, and now they're saying this Planet X, Nibiru, has the Anunnaki. Are the Anunnaki the reptilians and the Palladians? Are these the archons and watchers and fallen angels? What's it got to do with gray aliens? They inherited this from the Sumerians, Zacharias Stitchins and the Anunnaki, mentioning Sumerians here, who presumably had observed many solar cycles, 3,600 year cycles, thus attesting to their knowledge of astronomy. The Alexandrian Library and the School of Mathematics and Astronomy was then formed, and the Greeks surpassed the fame of their predecessors. Why did they destroy the Library of Alexander? Who really runs our planet? Are they all human? Something called the Royals, I was watching a video today, and they served a subpoena or some kind of legal papers in August to the keepers. And the Royals say they own Earth, and they put these people we know as our leaders, the keepers and the banksters, in charge. And apparently they served them a notice of cease and desist because, as we all know, they're ripping off the system. They're ripping off us. So apparently there's talk out there of some kind of behind-the-scenes battle going on between the royals who say they own the earth and the keepers, the people they put in charge, to rule over the ignorant masses. All right, back to the book. Yet this institution knew no more than Pythagoras had brought back from Chaldea and Egypt. Democritus, Plato, Exodus also gathered remnants of wisdom from this people of a great past. And another page here kind of blew me away because of the eclipse we had just a week ago. And it's on page 29, How Eclipses Affect World Change. So you can imagine when I saw that title, I said, aha, I need to read that. How Eclipses Affect World Changes. So that was just a few days ago. And then 18 days from now is September 23rd. We've had all these crazy movies. We got all this stuff going on in the world. We got lots of evidence of something about to change. Spurred by these studies, Copernicus added his voice to the demands of astrologers in the Middle Ages for facts and experiments. He contended from his study of eclipses that these phenomena preceded radical change. Can you imagine me when I'm reading this? I read this book years ago, but here I'm reading it again, and it really hits it right on the target. He contended from his study, Middle Ages now, of eclipses that these phenomena preceded radical change. And then I'm watching the news about North Korea apparently testing a nuclear bomb for the 5th time, and everything is escalating. The attack on Trump is escalating. All this stuff, White Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, and all these divide and conquer events are escalating. And I'm reading this. He found that after total solar eclipses, troops were shifted along lines delineating the path of totality, and that the European rulers who were born during an eclipse, while Mars was within 5 degrees of the midheaven, usually died a violent death. It happened that on November 2nd, 878 AD, about 1,200 years ago, a total annular eclipse path traversed what is now called Old Wapping Road, Wapping, no wonder I can't say that, from Chester to London, King Alfred stopped the invading Vikings dead in their tracks along the line defined by the edge of the eclipse path. So the eclipse came from Oregon all the way down to South Carolina. And I was thinking, what would they be doing there? They'd be planning or some kind of celestial prophecy of a civil war in the United States, where that's the divining line. That's what it says here. There were Vikings on one side and Britons on the other. The country was thus divided, and that eclipse divided the United States. Just interesting. I use my brain when I'm reading. Charles Jane, Jr., editor of In Search, reported that during World War II, Allied military observers and strategists noticed mass troop movements immediately following eclipses. Can an eclipse have an effect on the mind or mass mind? Some kind of gravitational electromagnetic energy? Directly after one of these solar eclipses, 5 divisions of the American First Army crossed the Rhine in 1945. Following presidential instructions, General Omar Bradley ordered his forces to withdraw behind the eclipse's path as Russian troops marched in to occupy East German territory. After 2 decades, the country was still divided this way. So what year was this book published? 1966. Just interesting to get some of these older books. 50 years ago, this book was published about. While commanding his lonely fortress, Copernicus was able to repulse both Polish occupation troops and the attacking hordes of Teutonic knights, because he knew in advance of an eclipse when and where they would move to strike. But of course, he also had a cannon, a fact not generally known. This great Polish astrologer seemed almost destined to formulate a rational scientific concept of the universe. There is some really interesting things coming up next. But let me take a break and show you a little bit what I have learned about my horoscope. Well, I'm probably like most people. Every now and then you read your horoscope. You know, I never really took it too serious. But, interestingly enough, the more I have researched, learned about remote viewing, learned about the government's investigation, black op projects into mind control, the moon's effect on people, and electromagnetic radiations and different effects that the governments have studied, how to make whole groups of people become agitated, sick. They've weaponized electromagnetic radiations, as well as chemical effects. Chemicals dumped in the sky, filling our bodies with a higher percentage of heavy metals. How's that going to work out with the different frequencies with the 5G network and the existing systems that they've been testing? And how's it going to work out with the known effects if the different planets do have a gravitational, electromagnetic, some kind of invisible effect on us? So I put some thought to this. One thing I did, which is interesting, you can do, but I went on a website called The Planets Today. Just go to theplanetstoday.com and it'll show you the planets where they are today. And on the top right hand side, you'll see a little arrow like this here, where my finger is, that little arrow. If you click that, it gives you controls. and you can back up to your birthday, time of day, the birth date, and the birth year, and you can get a chart like this. I just bring it up on the screen, and then I take a picture of it with a camera, and then I open up the download the picture from my camera to my computer, and with one of the picture software programs I have, I print out a picture or chart of my birthday a long time ago. And it shows me on this chart that Uranus and Jupiter are in the sign of Cancer. That's called conjunction. And Mars is in Aries. From the perspective when you're sitting on Earth, the hour that you're born, if you could think and talk, your family usually documents this, or somebody, your birth date and time. But if you're sitting at that place on the planet and you look out and you look towards the sun, of course, on the opposite side of the, in this case, I'm an Aquarian. The sun is here and the earth is here, so I'm on the earth and I look towards the sun, and this is Aquarius. So that puts me born when the sun is in Aquarius. And Mercury is in Aquarius. And Mars is in Aries. And Uranus and Jupiter are both in Cancer. That's called conjunction. Venus, Saturn are in Sagittarius. Neptune is in Libra. It's just interesting to look into it. And you can go on the internet to cafeastrology.com and you can plug in your birth date, hour, year, all the information that it requests. And it gives you a natal chart report like you can see here for me. And it's kind of fascinating to read about yourself. A little bit more detailed than just reading your daily horoscope on the computer or on a newspaper. But it did cause me to ponder and think, as I usually do. You know, I said, who and what are we? I believe we're spiritual beings in these biological bodies. Call it a spirit, what kind of entity, a ghost, whatever, a soul. So I believe, and if there's something called soul growth, let's say I'm in my 7th reincarnation, and according to my research using a pendulum, you can have a chart with 1 through 1,000 and ask questions to the chart if you know how to use a pendulum, or other psychic means, or see a psychic. Anyways, they'll tell you which incarnation you are in, whether you are a young soul, a middle-aged soul, an old soul. Does it matter? So anyways, my point is, that's one identity for me, my spiritual being. And I'm on earth at this time, and I'm born at a particular day and hour and place. And when you look out from the planet towards the heavens, towards the sun on the opposite side, the sun would be in that constellation, hence I'm Aquarius. And then you look around in the different planets where they are on your chart, and where they are, the constellation is, and apparently those constellations have influences, as well as those planets have influences. Whether they are at 90 degrees, which they call squared, and which is supposed to be possibly the most detrimental situation, squared, 90 degrees, or 60 degree they call sextant, and which is influential but not that influential, or trine, which is 2 times the sextant, 120 degrees, and that's supposed to be the most beneficial. So when you do go to a person who can make up chart, or you go on this computer program, cafeastrology.com, they will connect lines to the different planets in the sky where they were when you were born, and they will tell you your squares and your sextants or your trines, and of course everybody knows their sun sign. Born on the earth, look at the sun, and the opposite side is where the sun is in that constellation. That's your sun sign. So I've been learning this stuff on the different angles of those planets with relationship to each other and the earth, number one, and where they are in the constellation, and the different effects. For example, a lot of people know how Scorpio people are, or Libra people are, or Aquarian, or Cancer, whatever sign they are, they kind of have an idea. So, again, back to my premise of this conversation. Who am I? What am I? So I think one is I am a spiritual being. I think that is what it is. So that makes up me. But when me, the spiritual entity, goes into the embryo or the baby, the infant, before it's born, because remember, these signs are the day that you come out of the womb, that's your birth date. And that determines your astrological sign. And as an infant, those influences appear, if astrology is true, to imprint upon that infant, that human, call this a biological robot if you want to, the vehicle for the spirit, it imprints a characteristic on that body, not to be confused with the spirit. The spirit could be an old soul, a young soul. It comes with characteristics of its own, but now it's combined with a biological body that was born that day, with those influences of the planets in those particular constellations, as well as where the sun is, what sign you are. So that's two things that I am. One is I'm my spiritual being, and number two, I am in this vehicle, call it a computer program, whatever, but I am gifted with or programmed with certain characteristics. I'm not a Cancer, I'm not a Libra, I'm an Aquarian. So I just thought about this. What else could I possibly be? Well, one, if I was born on the day I was and the hour I was, and if I was born in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and my family were Muslims or whatever, then that would be a third part of my characteristics. In my case, of course, I was born in the United States, Pennsylvania, and I grew up in a Christian home, culture. And so that's a third imprint upon who I am, is my culture, my religion, my family values, rich or poor, even my looks, short or tall, sick. So the culture that I'm born into is a third effect of who I am. And then I thought about the fourth effect, who I am. So you grow up in a culture, you start watching TV, you go to the education system, you get hypnotized, mesmerized by the political atmosphere we're living in right now, where everything is about change. You either identify yourself as a Democrat or a Republican, and you're under mind control, and you hate the Republicans, the conservatives, those haters. Or you could be Republican, and those liberals, those progressives, those people into satanic, luciferic sex orgies, whatever you want to do. So that makes up a fourth component to us. I'm just saying it might behoove us all to contemplate who and what we are. And that it is the astrological, apparently, the planets, our sun sign, our influences on this biological body. The soul that we came with, a young soul, old soul, new soul. Maybe it's a really old soul, and this is your last incarnation. The culture, religion, events in our lives, deaths in the family, catastrophe, car accidents, and then, of course, the re-education, mind control, even demonic possession. You see people's faces, some of these people who are terrorist shooters, you know, where they have shootings or bombings, and you look at their eyes, some of these people look like they're definitely possessed. Quite a few of them. And deception and illness and drugs and alcohol. And now with the 5G network and all the programming, and it can make you think thoughts. So that's another fourth part of our identity we need to be concerned about. So I'm just saying, being a thinking, rational person, you need to pay attention to who you are, what you think you are, why you think you're that way. All the Republicans are not necessarily evil. All the Democrats are not necessarily evil. The North Koreans, those citizens there, are probably not evil. Even President Putin of Russia said that the president of North Korea will see his citizens eat grass so he can spend all the money on weapons. So what are we to believe? 911, obviously an inside job, and every day we're being sprayed with chemicals from the sky, and the HARP transmitters appear to be controlling the weather, and they're bringing us 5G network. Why aren't people getting a little upset? So anyways, I was just thinking about those things, looking into this chart. So anyways, my natal chart report, after plugging that in, just let's see if we read it, and looking at the character that I've been making videos, does it jive? What follows is your personal natal chart information, as well as interpretations of the positions and aspects, the particular degrees of angles of those planets in the constellation they're in at the moment of my birth, and aspects in your chart. With this report, you will find out the positions of the planets in your natal chart by sign. The most personal of these are the sun sign, the moon sign. That's why it's important you know the hour, because the moon can move through a couple different constellations, or another one, within 24 hours. Mercury sign, Venus sign, and Mars sign. Most people already know their sun sign. If your time of birth is known, you will also find out your ascendant or rising sign, as well as the positions of the planets in the houses of your chart. Aspects between the planets are also listed and interpreted. And again, I might remind people watching my video, I study different topics. I've investigated everything I could possibly think about. The Kabbalah, witchcraft, the Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, mysticism, Zionism, communism, trying to figure out what the heck is going on in our world. So I thought to myself, it's about time. I read this book on astrology years ago, that I bring it into the conversation, and usually, in my life anyways, things always happen for a reason. Time and place for everything. So the sun changes signs every 30 days or so, as we all know. There's 12 constellations. Interestingly enough, they have recently come out with the fact that there are not 12 constellations. There are 13. And the 13th sign, no wonder they kept it hidden, is Orpheus. The sign is a serpent in the sky, a serpent. You can go on the computer and look this up. So now there are 13 signs. They've come out of the closet, so to speak, with the Orpheus serpent. Why did they hide that all those years? So now what sign are you, looking at the new astrological chart? Just saying. And of course we're entering the paradigm shift, new age and new world order, which apparently is satanic, luciferic, which is the serpent, the reptilian, which apparently are the Palladians, which apparently are the Anunnaki and other beings, gray aliens, with this planetary Planet X coming. Nemesis, the star of Planet X, is called the Destroyer. Coincidences? Way too many, I think. All right, some of these interpretations will be contrary, just as people are contrary. So that's what I was thinking when I looked at this. So what this physical body, this brain, characteristics, my wills, my strengths, my weaknesses, was my natal chart, the hour I was born, the day, the year, where those planets were. And there are books you can look up to tell you which kind of characteristics the different planets exhibit on you. And when they are powerful, like if they're trine 120 degrees, they're powerful. 60 degrees is sextant. They're powerful, but not that powerful. And square 90 degrees, they're could be detrimental or their weakest effect or strength. A person can be downright timid in love, and that same person can be aggressive in business. So in other words, we're all different. And learning that about how to use a pendulum and studying healing and stuff like that, I know from my research that we're all different. Some people have greater degrees or capacities for love. Somebody may not have a whole lot of love, but they may have a whole lot of consideration for other people. But they may have very little love. Some people may have a whole lot of love for certain people, but very little consideration. And the same thing with compassion or empathy. Some people may have zero empathy. They don't care about if they see somebody dying. Somebody may have a lot of empathy. Some people may have a little bit of hate. Some people may be murderous and want to kill, have a thirst of it. And there's dozens and dozens of these characteristics that are all measurable. And if you go take a test, a psychological test, that they ask you all these questions, and then they print out a chart, and it shows you all these peaks and valleys. And apparently you're supposed to be somebody who just has a particular pattern, and then a bunch of wavy lines over here. So you could have a whole lot of goodness and very little evil. Or you could have a whole lot of evil tendencies, bad, and very little love tendencies. That makes sense. You're not going to be loving and benevolent and go get a job as an assassin. You're either going to hate people or love people. And there are different degrees. Some people can not hate people, but they just dislike people. They just don't want to be around people. They're indifferent. And some people, of course, can love people too much. Get smothered, all these terminologies. So there are a long list of these characteristics, and they're all measurable. And it seems to have some kind of, like a CD computer software program, where you're programmed. And apparently we're programmed when we're born with our astrological influences on the body. But we're also the soul that was alive before it went into the body. Old soul, young soul, who knows? Go see a psychic if you want to find out, if you're curious, if you believe in that. And then, of course, your culture, religion, events in our lives. And then, of course, the fourth one, seemingly the one that's turning people all over the planet into zombies, the deception, the 911. North Korea supposedly exploding a nuke. Is this guy trying to call on the destruction of his country? Were the Palestinians really launching rockets over there into Israel so they would be completely annihilated and destroyed? Did some knuckleheads in a mountain in Afghanistan really want to slam planes into Twin Towers so that the whole entire Middle East could be annihilated? Or did somebody plan all that so they could deceive the rest of us? From my research, it was all planned, and many of us were deceived. Anyway, so if astrology, here's another important point I'm trying to make here also. If these influences are real, if people can use it to benefit from the stock market, wars, and other things, and knowing the influences on the population, knowing that a full moon brings out the crazies, would they create an event during a full moon? Look at that thing I was watching on the a video the other day. They were burning a giant wooden man, the burning man. And apparently some crazy man in the crowd, maybe he was inebriated, drinking or on drugs, ran into the area where this gigantic burning man was taking place, and he got burned. So that's why it made the papers. If he didn't run into it and he didn't get burned, I wonder if it would have made the papers. But anyways, the burning man is a satanic ritual, in my opinion. I've watched movies and they have these gigantic straw men, they call them. They tie all the straw and wood together and they put people inside and then they burn it. So witches celebration. So my question was, why were they having a satanic ritual like that in the first place? And on my comment section on a press release where I said that, I go, this was a satanic thing. Why were they having a satanic ritual? And one of the commenters said, define satanic, Satanism. So people were skeptical and mocking me, and another person mocked me and said people don't want to hear what I have to say. And then when I tried to rebuttal, put a comment back and tell these people the truth, or, you know, why would that guy say that nobody wants to listen to me, or the other guy doesn't understand what Satanism is, when we're getting all kinds of satanic symbolism, the archway of Baal in New York and London, and later on I found out through UNESCO, the United Nations, they were putting 1,000 of these archways of Baal. Satanic? It's the devil. The goat on the Hoover Dam, the goat is a symbol for the devil. Gigantic goat projection. Shiva, the goddess of destruction, on the Empire State Building. You can go look this up and see the pictures. The goddess of destruction is satanic. The rainbow on bridges and buildings and all across the countries when the Supreme Court passed some kind of legislation saying that states couldn't ban gay marriage. That same day, all these rainbow symbols was on bridges and buildings, even the White House. They couldn't have done that in a couple hours or a day. And of course, the opening ceremony for that tunnel in Switzerland, even demons with horns dropping from the sky, railroad cars with people seemingly looking like they're naked, all groping sexual orgies, which is satanic, according to Rabbi Marvin Antelman, with DeFrancus and forget the name of that other group of Messiah Jewish people, or Aleister Crowley and other books. So there's this satanic going on. Football, Super Bowl halftime shows, even Madonna had the horns. Katy Perry and Emmys or Grammys, clearly satanic situation. Miley Cyrus. The CERN, the images they're seeing in the portals. Anyways, I don't need to keep going on. Conchita Wurst winning the American Idol program with the head like Jesus and the body in a silky dress. Conchita means a female part. Wurst means sausage, a male part, singing the song The Phoenix Rising, which has the words in it, "You Can't Stop Us." And the phoenix is a representation of the whole world going up in flames. So the new phoenix, the new world can be born. Crazy? So I'm just saying the fourth characteristics of us by the education system, the mind control, the TV, the movies, the possession, demonic possession, people into witchcraft, illnesses, drugs. That's who we are. All right, moving on a little bit more about my chart. Talking about me. We all have choices, and one of the largest benefits of astrology is the ability to understand ourselves better so that we can work on our natal charts rather than against them. Okay, my birth chart here says one of the standout characteristics of those born under the sun sign of Aquarius is their unwillingness to follow the beaten track. I suppose that would be me. With advancement and progress on their minds, there can be no irreverence to old and outdated ways of thinking and doing things. Many Aquarians aim to free themselves of personal and social conditioning. Although open to change in theory, Aquarians can be surprisingly stubborn. Their idealism runs strong, but they can be very fixed in their opinions. Often a bit aloof and even standoffish, Aquarians, nevertheless, are usually well liked. They are curious and observant, and tolerant in a broad sense. Prejudice and bias is offensive to the typical Aquarians. So there's much more here. It's quite fascinating. But I think what's more fascinating is what's in this book on the things I'm about to read. And again, I'm just trying to show that there's more to reality than we all know. There are forces and knowledge out there, which they call the occult, mysticism, the Kabbalah, witchcraft. Why did they sacrifice people? Why did they drain children of blood and drink it to get euphoric feelings? I guess they can see into other dimensions. Even with Carlos Castaneda in a separate reality going down to Mexico taking peyote with a shama so he could see this other dimension. So can there be these evil forces and these good forces, God or Jesus or Lucifer and Satan? It does seem that that does exist and these forces exist. And can there be electromagnetic and gravitational forces that affect us like the moon? And will these new technological invention systems be used as a weapon, weaponized against we the people, mind control, changing who we are, and we don't even know it? So I think it does behoove me or anybody else to look at all these different topics and try to ponder, what is really going on, especially with this stuffing the news this day. Even a friend of mine mentioned to me, she said, it's just crazy. They've been building up this North Korean thing. And, they said something in the news today that, instead of 1,000 or 2,000 Americans dying, wouldn't it be just a good idea to kill millions of North Koreans? And weren't they saying that about the Syrians? Weren't they saying that about the Iraqians? Weren't they saying that about the Afghanistan people? Don't they say that trying to cause dissension against the Russians or the Chinese? Is somebody trying to bring us World War III? And are there any astrological clues about this stuff? Has there been in the past? So I'll keep reading from the book and you decide. So previously, that paragraph I read was about eclipses affect world change. And now we got something called the Discoveries of Tycho Brahe. And some of this may seem a little mundane or boring. But remember, sometimes it's the backup early information you get that leads to clarity on future information in this book, which is the case. You got to go with the bad to get the good if you want to learn about reality. Just like my videos on so many different topics, you can't just watch one video and think you understand what's going on in the world. Or you go on my website, rickmiracle.com, and on the left-hand side is a link. You can see videos on YouTube, a little line there, and click it, and you can cut and paste a cheat sheet so you can watch the videos you want with the names of the book and the authors, the topics. And you can also take those names of those authors, and usually you can find those authors, either somebody talking about them or them speaking, lecturing, whatever, in some kind of talk show. So you really can control your education. And in this day and age, when we're about to probably go through some huge world change, I can't see that they've done as much as they have done. World War I, World War II, and prophesized World War III, and so much other stuff. 9/11. That they're going to stop or turn around now. That freight train of change, of this thing coming at us, deception and destruction, seems to be unstoppable. So I do think knowledge is probably a pretty smart thing. Knowledge is power. So the discoveries of Tycho Brahe. Tycho Brahe provided an exact planetary figures which enabled his most promising pupil, Johannes Kepler, to work out his great laws of motion. Yet Tycho practiced and defended astrology with all of his intellectual and emotional power. In one of his many duels as a young student, the fiery Dane's nose was sliced off. So this Tycho Brahe got in a duel with somebody, and I guess with swords, and his enemy cut off his nose. The resourceful Tycho created a copper placebo, whatever, not a proboscis, a fake nose. Painted it flesh color and attached it each morning. Oh my. The disfigurement drove him into a common law marriage with a peasant woman who eventually bore him 7 children. No noblewoman would have him. So even without a nose, he was out there having sex and children. Good for him. Nevertheless, it did not prevent the King of Denmark from presenting Tycho with an island where Brahe built the first astronomical observatory in the Western world solely for the purpose of expanding and perfecting his astrological work. I wonder how many other people would have moved forward with their life's goal with some kind of handicap like that. And that should be a lesson to all of us. We have no handicaps. We only have handicaps that we think we have. In order to do this, Tycho worked out a system of figuring the exact timing of the solar system. The planetary tables of King Alfonso, then in use, were off by days, sometimes even weeks. So it does take a lot of calculations, because I had to go back on the planets today to way back then, and get that exact configuration. So I guess back then, without computers, that would have been a lot of work. In order to plot the exact courses and positions of planets, minutes were of prime importance to Tycho. When young Kepler came to work at the Dane's as the Dane's assistant, he was not only unacquainted with astrology, he scoffed openly at such superstitious nonsense. To deny astrology, the noseless Dane thundered, is to deny the glory of God. Tycho's star, another paragraph here. Brahe could predict social prominence from horoscope data, and claimed that Jupiter's position on the midheaven near the upper meridian at birth indicated success or fame. So when you were born, I guess where Jupiter's position is, and you can go on astrologicalcafe.com, astrology cafe, cafeastrology.com, and do your own natal chart there and print out and read all that stuff and see if it fits, and do it for other people, your spouse, your friend, your family. So Jupiter's position in the midheaven indicated success and fame because Jupiter was the great benefit, the planet of good fortune, expansiveness, and prominence. So when I looked at my chart, Jupiter and Cancer were conjunct, both of them with Uranus were in Cancer. Uranus and Jupiter were in Cancer, called conjunct. I suppose I need to really clarify what that means. All takes time and patience. It happened that one of the reasons Bra chose Kepler to succeed him was because of Jupiter's placement in the young man's horoscope. Can you imagine hiring people based on their horoscope? That would be interesting. You know, if you had a company and you wanted to be successful. The Dane said that Kepler would carry on his own work and become a world-famous astrologer. Although Kepler did become an astrologer and also become famous, it was his 3 laws of motion which made his name great in the annals of science. In November of 1572, a brilliant new star appeared in the heavens. I thought this was interesting. We're expecting Planet X Nibiru, according to all the YouTube videos and books I have, and websites, etc., channeled material from channelers, psychics. And here in 1572, a bright new star appeared in the heavens, a true supernova, the rarest of astronomical events. It was so bright it could be seen in full daylight, and it lasted for 18 months. 1572. So that just begs me to ask myself, do the astronomers know something is coming, like another new star or supernova, like 1572, where the world didn't end or turn upside down? So do they know this, and are they preparing us so that we'll believe its destruction? Fair question. I was reading this and I go, oh my, I didn't know that. Pressed for an astrological interpretation of this event, actually a supernova in Cassiopeia, Tycho published 2 heavy velvet-bound volumes in which he concluded that a great soldier and humanitarian would arise in Finland and would reign from 1593 and die a violent death in 1632. So we had an eclipse. They've been prophesizing this Planet X Nibiru star system. And apparently these things bring great change. Lest we forget, when Jesus was born, there was a star in the sky, which gave notice to the 3 wise men to come to where Jesus was born and visit the baby in the manger. And one of those kings went and visited the king of the Jews and told him that this new king was coming. And of course, the king of the Jews ordered all children under 2 years old to be killed for fear of this prophesied king. Just saying. So anyways, back then, Gustavus Adolphus was born in Stockholm in 1594. So this was a famous man named Adolphus, which is long for Adolf, which I thought was weird. When Finland was a Swedish province and was killed in battle with Wallenstein's mercenaries in 1632. Gustavus was a great humanitarian, soldier, and patriot who seemed convincingly testimony to Tycho's accuracy. So he prophesied that somebody famous and a humanitarian would coming and would die in battle. The Dane was remarkably clever, resourceful, and inventive. He devised all kinds of precise instruments to measure angular stellar distances, longitude, declination, and latitude. So they were really thoughtful about the position of the stars at somebody's birth and how they would determine the characteristics of people. He trained more than 40 astrologers and astronomers and lived in luxury. Counts, dukes, and even kings from all over Europe came to visit his court and stayed for months, awed by the astrologer's forceful personality and broad knowledge. He was also remarkably objective. During 14 years of hard work, he made literally thousands of precise instruments and finally experienced the crowning achievement of his life, a catalog of 777, an unusual number there, stars. So he cataloged 777 new stars, every one of them a completely new determination. This was the first star catalog since the days of Hippocrates, the early Greek astrologer-astronomer. The wind of evil, another paragraph. Through the efforts, Tycho provided the figures which enabled Kepler to create his new celestial mechanics. Without them, astronomy would now be centuries behind its current progress. There is no doubt that before he succeeded his Danish teacher, Kepler was powerfully influenced by him. Within the 2 years he spent as Tycho's assistant, Kepler became thoroughly acquainted with the older man's interpretation of every event as the effect of celestial influence. For example, get this, and this is important stuff. He predicted outbreaks of seemingly motiveless murders, attacks, crimes, and held these events to be caused by the 27 1/3 day lunar cycle. So on a full moon or a new moon, he noticed that there were more murders, attacks, and crimes during those periods of time, which even modern day scientists and hospitals have figured out just by observing it. And again, I say, if these electromagnetic or gravitational forces of the moon and all the planets can affect us, change our mood, our emotion, our lives, what will the 5G network do and all the other electromagnetic systems they're putting in place, knowing that there's a prophesized mark of the beast and they've got these Vera chips, they're already microchipping people, cameras to spy on every one of us. They want to have these computers hooked up to our car, our debit card, our TV, our phone. They can literally monitor us everywhere we go. There's no place to hide, 24/7. And all of we, the people, are just allowing this system to be put in place. The government clearly said, even the leader of the communications regulatory departments, what's the name of that, said that they will not have any kind of testing or public hearings, that America is going to move forward. I was watching that video. And produce billions of dollars of commerce. But there are so many videos on YouTube warning about the detrimental effects and the detrimental controls it'll have over us. And if you've read books like The Protocols of Zion and Jewish Utopia and so many other books, Secret Societies, Freemasonic books, high level, not all the low level people who are dupes and go in there to be part of societies or business connections. So many people don't think. They use these organizations as recruitment centers. They find people who will be despicable and they rise to the top. They'll wind up being your politician or your president. Consider that. And I've gone over a lot of material and a lot of books. This isn't a theory. A lot of people have come out of the closet, or whistleblowers. A lot of people have been killed, assassinated, even President John Kennedy. We better wake up to what our world entails right now. It's quite important. That destructive freight train is coming. You can almost hear it. People hear these strange noises in the ground. And then they say they're building all these underground tunnels in cities. What do you think? The 20th century Nobel Prize-winning chemist Svante Arrhenius of Sweden upheld Tycho by proving, here we go, more proof, that the ion conductivity in the atmosphere increased the rate of violent crime every 27 1/3 days. So the moon was causing an increase in ion conductivity in the atmosphere, and apparently the HAARP system is supposed to interact with the ionosphere. The Gwen Towers are towers with a web on the base of the tower, 330 feet wires in all directions, like a big circle. And they're building these Gwen towers every 200 miles, all over the United States, maybe the world. So if you know anything about electricity, they can, you take two magnets and you turn them around and you can't push them together. So the same thing with weather fronts coming through. Water is charged with electricity, and when two clouds hit each other, the charge increases sharply and causes a lightning bolt. Get it? Got it? So with these Gwen towers and whole many miles, every 200 miles a Gwen tower, they can charge up the whole ground. With the HARP transmitters, they can ionize or de-ionize the depending on the polarity, adding protons or electrons or taking them away, or punching holes through the ionosphere. So I'm just saying, with the proposed New World Order, New Age, and the Georgia USA Guidestones calling for a serious population reduction, as well as some book reviews I've recently done on the population bomb or the limits to growth, or the report from Iron Mountain, or the economic terrorists with John Perkins. I didn't do all those book reviews on those books for nothing or just a coincidence. They're telling us a story, and these people are going to be having super advanced technologies to use against us. So it just might make us pay attention here that these scientists many years ago figured out that the ion conductivity in the atmosphere increases the rate of violent crime every 27 1/3 day by the natural movement of the moon. They figured this out years ago, hundreds of years ago. The relationship between Kepler and Bra was a volatile combination, often flaring into violent quarrels and ending in deep remorse. So it'd be interesting to read these two guys' astrological charts, their natal charts. When was their birthday and the hour? See what was ascending or what was trine at 120 degrees. What sign their sun was in. They were like father and son, but young Kepler was more interested in pure theory of the time, astronomy, than in applied science. So he was more interested in astronomy than in applied science, aspect astrology, with the avowed purpose of discrediting it once and for all. Kepler began a serious study of astrology. And as so many times is the case, somebody sets out to prove once and for all that that stuff's bogus. And once they start studying it, they find out it's true. And that's the same thing with all these conspiracies to bring us a new age and a new world order. That there are plenty of books out there that I've gone over and showed in my videos. This is not hearsay. The Freemasons were publishing a magazine calling the New Age. The presidents have said the New World Order. Even President George Bush Sr. said out of chaos and anarchy will come the New World Order. It's the Hegelian dialectic. They need to bring us chaos and anarchy to bring us the New Age. The way the people, it's even said that in the Protocols of Zion, the people will beg to be enslaved. They intend to make it that nasty. So I'm going to continue researching astrology and just see what kind of planetary alignments are coming and what kind of planetary alignments happened in the past when they had the beginning of World War I, World War II, and 9/11. Let's see if I can learn a little bit more and see if there's any way you can predict these events. Should be interesting to just poke your nose in that and look into it. It's easy to go on the planetstoday.com and go back to the day of 9/11 and the beginning of World War I when they declared war, or World War II, and other big events. and look at the astrological picture and see what the what constellation certain planets are in and stuff like that. And then look at the planetstoday.com website and see where these are. And then they have a forward time control button there. Move it forward and say, oh my goodness, the scenario's coming up again. Just be interesting to look into that. I'm sure people already have on YouTube videos or websites, and I probably even have books on this stuff that they have correlated this information. Apparently there was a lot of correlation between President John Kennedy's death and Abraham Lincoln. A whole lot of coincidences. All right, back to the book, page 32, the Mars business cycle. So Kepler was working for Bra, the guy who had his nose cut off, who was quite the astronomer. Anyways, he started by evaluating the effects of the aprogene and perigene passages of Mars, furthest from and closest to the Earth respectively, and was forced to conclude that these transits have an important connection with business activity. Well, I guess if you were investing in the stock market, that might be beneficial information. When Mars gets further away or when it comes closer to Earth. What kind of effects does it have? Can you go back and see where it was further away and closest? And can you look at the stock market? Remember what happened back then. Be curious to see where it was on 2008. Just saying. The 2008 stock market crash. Was Mars really far away? I'll have to go look that up. Alright, it was forced to conclude that these transits have an important connection with business activity, and there were always peaks or rises in the German markets at these times. Some modern-day security analysts and cycle researchers seem to have come upon the same idea. Wow. Several prominent New York brokers abide by it in the stock transactions. The simple 22.5-month cycle of Mars is probably connected with the so-called real estate cycle of the same approximate duration. But Kepler plunged into deeper researches. He decided that the 7.5-month helicycle period of Venus was vitally significant in the incidences of disease epidemics and in the reoccurrence of critical phases in the known forms of insanity. So could the position of Venus have an effect on the ability of bacteria or viruses like the plague, Ebola, to manifest and grow more than it would at another time? Some kind of an electromagnetic gravitational influence on those biological entities, whether it is a virus or a bacterium. Curious thing about that, how does the planets and the sun and your sign affect your DNA when you're born, affect the alignment of it? Our cells in our body are electrically charged. So if they wanted to really pull out the bag of tricks, weapons on a plague, probably releasing it at a time when Venus was in an interesting position, would make the disease more potent. Just thinking. From his diligent researches, Kepler concluded that astrology was the study of the law of correspondence, which seemed to exist between celestial and terrestrial phenomenon and man. He was the first of his time to notice the attraction of the moon caused the tides in the ocean. Considering the times, this alone was something of heresy. So a lot of these people were burned at the stake for discovering things. Another topic here says astronomical weather forecasters. So I guess before they had radar and the systems they have today, they were forecasting the weather by astrology. Astrology and astronomy. You can't have astrology without astronomy, knowing the position of the stars, etc. His earliest work, Mysterium Cosmographium, was born as a result of his astrological studies and truly launched his career. In 1602, he published De Fundamentalist Astrology in Prague. Someone managed to destroy half of his work, but the other half was hidden in the observatory in Pukowa. Early in the 19th century, a German physicist found it, made a translation, and had it reprinted in Frankfurt in 1858. This is why many modern astrologers consider Germany as the best source of modern scientific astrological material. Johannes Kepler published the first two of his now famous laws in 1609. But it was his weather forecast that originally brought him fame. He predicted the bitterly cold winter in Steiermark and the revolutionary disturbances among the Austrian peasantry in 1592. Wow. The publication of the Mysterium Cosmographium established and stabilized his career. He maintained an astro-weather diary from 1617 to 1629, which included his notes, rules, formula, and planetary configurations. So I suppose the planetary electromagnetic and gravitational forces would affect our sun and even our planet and solar wind and things like that. It is electromagnetic functions that control motors so that they move and steer. And these influences certainly seem like they could cause controls or reactions on planet Earth, which again brings me back to all these systems they're putting in place. I don't think it's a coincidence, and I don't think it's beneficial to human health or human social change for the 5G network and a lot of the other things they're doing. The HAARP systems, HAARP, strategically located Alaska, Puerto Rico, Norway, big V's all over the world. I've showed the pictures. You can go up on Yahoo image site and put in HAARP, H-A-A-R-P, and see all the pictures and the websites that reference those details. And ask yourself, are they doing this for our benefit? Why would they want to alter the ionosphere when we know that it controls human behavior during new moons or full moons? People go crazy, commit crimes, or go mad. What could they do with such knowledge and such technologies? What do they plan on bringing us? Obviously, it's not very nice with all the satanic symbolism everywhere. The diary was published by Dr. Gold in 1886 in his book Astrometeorologica, 56 years after Kepler's death. Actually, it was Aristotle who wrote the first known treatise on astronomical weather. On the publication of Astrometeorological, Dr. Gould's book was immediately recognized as the world authority on weather prediction until modern scientists discarded the idea of planetary influences on the weather 200 years later. What do you think? They seem to have been accurately predicting the weather with astrology before the new advanced methods. All right, moving on. Just think it's interesting to correlate the apparent seriousness and evidence that there is something to astrology and the electromagnetic systems they're building today, and their insistent demands that they're not going to have any public input. Seems like somebody's rushing forward to do something. Another topic here is modern weather astrologers. RCA Communications, Inc. now uses a form of Keplerian astrology to predict storms in the ionosphere, which garble and destroy shortwave radio communications. These storms are caused by sunspots and solar flares, which RCA's chief weatherman, John Nelson, predicts with 93% accuracy. He sets up charts and effect horoscopes of the planet's positions in relation to the sun. That just gave me a chilling thought with this 5G network expanding every function in our lives, our reality, our cars, the sewer system, the electric grid, your refrigerator. Everything with this new 5G network. Everything. Billions of microchips everywhere. And remember the threat of an EMP pulse burning everything out. If they tie our entire system, and here they already predict events with sunspots and other ionization activity and what kind of effects it causes on Earth. For thousands of years, astrologers have referred to certain angles between planets as favorable and others as unfavorable. So they know the different angles of these magnetic fields from these different planets create favorable or unfavorable effects on humans. And I know from my research, they've been testing this even in laboratories, and they know what they can do with some of these electromagnetic devices and tools, frequencies, on we the people. The 90-degree or square angle is generally considered adverse. On the other hand, 120 degrees has always been considered the most beneficial aspect, called trine. I mentioned all this earlier in this video. The 60-degree sextile aspect is considered good, but not as beneficial as a trine of 120 degrees. Astrologers consider each planet as a special indicator which operates through the astrological sign or constellation and is further modified by the degree of the house which marks the divisions of the zodiac wheel. So like I said, you can go on cafeastrology.com and plug in your birth date and all that information they ask you. Print out your own natal chart and other charts. You might reveal something you were wondering or perplexing you about yourself or somebody else. Is this stuff real? I believe there is more to reality than we all know. That's the premise of my research, that all things are connected and that we are spiritual beings in these biological bodies, and a lot of stuff in mythology and religion and the ancient hieroglyphics, whether it's in Egypt or in the Mexican Riviera, the Mayans, pyramids in India, China, Romania. There's something to this electromagnetic world, and it might behoove all of us to wake up to that fact and realize that there are some evil entities who have some detrimental plans for the rest of us. After 50 years of hard objective research, during which he went through mountains of data, astrometeorologist George McCormack crystallized the essence of a new approach to weather forecasting. He made the first formular scientific presentation of weather astrology to the American Meteorological Society in January 1964. So apparently these people who control our planet, the secret societies and other elites, are 100 years ahead in technology than what we the people know. And again, there's a lot of fear videos out there about the 5G. And I already know that the current technology with the cell phones that everybody carries and is on everywhere you go can cause brain cancer, burn out your ear, and all kinds of other problems. The children, everybody's addicted to these things, and I don't think it can be good for us. All right, magnetic angles. Several centuries previously, his predecessor, Johannes Kepler, reasoned that primary weather patterns in eastward transit are continually changing in intensity, latitude, and character around the globe in response to planetary and lunar solar phenomena affecting magnetic fields over various terrestrial areas. So they're acknowledging that these electromagnetic fields changing over terrestrial areas did cause problems, effects. These fields, he said, remained dormant until sparked or triggered by conjunctions of magnetic angles to sensitize points in space. So just think about that with all these Gwen towers every 200 miles, north, east, west, south, all over the United States. They can create all kinds of angles of magnetic influences. And they can be quite strong on we humans because of the heavy metals they're dumping in the sky that we consume in the water, the food, and breathe into our bodies. Do you think they know what they're doing? Reversing his original position on pure theory, Kepler attempted to convert astrology into an experimental and practical science. He kept statistics of the highest possible objectivity. Using his own findings as the basis, he found and recalculated more than 1,000 years of astronomical and mathematical era. Wow, that must have been a tedious job without a computer. That which he discovered through his astronomical studies went into the correction of his astrological data. With his horoscopes as a basis, he wrote descriptions of relatives, friends, and of himself with great insight and detail. Wow, I would have liked to have had him do my natal chart, my horoscope. In me, Saturn and the Sun work together in their sextile aspects. That's 120 degrees. To toil up mountains, to stumble over fields and rocky slopes. These things delight me. My destiny is similar. Where others despair, money and fame come to me, though in modest measure. I meet opposition. True astrology, he asserted, is a holy testimony to God's glorious works, and I, for my part, do not wish to dishonor it. Note that he stressed true astrology. He devised a different astrology from that which was used by the traditionalists of his day. Observe this. If today two planets stand at 89 degrees from one another, nothing will happen. In the air. So if they're at 89 degrees, nothing will happen in the air. But tomorrow, when the full square of 90 degrees is reached, a thunderstorm will suddenly arise. The effect, therefore, does not come from a single star, but from the angle, from the harmonious segment of the circle. So then again, I'm reminded of another thing. Crazy conversation here. You ready? Me and some friends met at some particular bar recently for a friend of ours' birthday party. And I'm reading this, the circle and the angles. And I look down on the floor. I kid you not, I'm going to draw a picture. All over the floor. Circle and star in a kind of convoluted shape like that. And if you look up Satanism, you'll see that everywhere. Tear it up. We need any witchcraft magic here. But all over the dance floor, I pointed it out to my friend later on. I didn't point it out, I mentioned it, and she said, well, yeah, what do you care? No big deal. And later on, I remember taking pictures during the birthday party. Everybody was dancing. And I looked down on the floor and the pictures, and you could see all the stars and circles. So is there some kind of magic connection to that? Apparently it is between planets. What's it got to do with the Kabbalah, mysticism, all this stuff? How did Jesus perform miracles? Where did all those prophets come from? What about these psychics today, the people who are channeling material? What is this other reality? Should we be concerned? All right, another chapter here. The music of the spheres. Kepler had formerly tried to fit the 5 regular solids in between the spheres of the planets. Now, he pointed out that the regular polygons, which could be constructed within a circle, yielded the astrological importance, planetary angles, square, time, conjunction, opposition, quadrature, sextile, etc. Well, that makes me think again. What about crop circles? You think somebody's telling us something? Is it magic? Are they causing something? Are they warning us? Are they trying to teach us? What's the purpose? Kepler demonstrated that these angles were related to the total number of degrees in a circle in the proportions of 1/2, 2/3, 3/4, 4/5, 5/6, 3/5, and 5/8. If he straightened his circle into a violin string, the astrological angles would correspond to the different divisions upon which harmonics are based. Remember music? You play some of those songs backwards and you hear something like the devil's voice. And a lot of people say they're using music these days, some kinds of it, as some kind of mind control. Even the TV flicker rate and other things you can't see or hear. A lot of stuff is going on. I mean, if this is astrology is real, caused by astronomy, the positions of the moons and the constellations and the earth and the sun, and if they have these electromagnetic devices all over the earth and satellites in space, which would create a very strong magnetic field, and they could create any angle they want, 120 degrees being beneficial and 90 degrees being detrimental. The music God made during the creation. So did God use electromagnetic vibrations and words, which is in the Bible? It says in the beginning was the Word. So what is the Word? A word, if you put your hand up to your mouth and speak, you'll feel the vibration. The words are vibrations. During the creation, he stated he also taught nature to play. Indeed, she repeats what he played to her. I have touched mountains, he said, when he finally succeeded in demonstrating the mathematical relationship between the distances of planets and their velocities. It is tremendous what smoke they belch forth. Kepler recalculated Ptolemy's orbit of Mars and found an era of a mere 8 minutes of arc. Those 8 minutes, he claimed afterwards, opened the way for me to review the whole of astronomy. The most amazing thing about his discovery of the law of areas is the fact that he totally lacked the mathematical tools which could finally prove his findings or even demonstrate this law. But credit to him, it worked. Only a master astrologer could have made such a remarkable deduction. Imagine that, no computers back then. They had to do this stuff. Another chapter here, intersecting world lines. And this stuff is not so traumatic as I'd like to talk about, but it does give us a basis of astrology. I will be re-looking at this book and exposing some even more interesting information, crazy information, certain dates when presidents were assassinated information. I did calculate those dates for Donald Trump when there was a conjunction of Jupiter's Saturn and Sagittarius. And two dates that I think Donald Trump should be concerned about is 11/25/2018 and 10/20/2019, because apparently some other presidents were killed on those astrological situations. Just saying, I was reading this book. I moved ahead here just to show you some of the stuff that's in here. Okay. Intersecting World Lines. An astrologer to Emperor Rudolf kept two. He was an astrologer to Emperor Rudolf II. Kepler cast the horoscopes of Augustus, Mohammed, and the Sultan of Turkey. Look how many people in high places were into astrology. Least we forget throughout history, and I'm not trying to just talk about Jewish people, but the Jewish people who were into the Kabbalah, mysticism, were generally astrologers, and they did astrologies and practiced medicine for kings and queens and elites. And a lot of them were called magicians, which do magic, which I can call witchcraft to make my point. And I'm not really opposed to us having knowledge about these things. I'm just opposed to that knowledge from being kept from the rest of us, and secret societies putting their hands on Bibles or other religious books, swearing under threat of death not to divulge those things to us, calling us profane. These Jews who want this new Jewish aristocrat world, and the rest of us enslaved, not all Jewish people, a lot of famous Jewish people have been trying to warn us. They know all this stuff, and they want to keep it secret. They call us cattle. So I guess you can use astrology to control the cattle. And can you use these 5G network and all this other electromagnetic technologies they've been building, like HARP, like Gwen Towers, and cell phone and wireless and TV flat screens? Even the power grid radiates a lot of energy. I guess the big question we need to ask, what do we think the intentions are? And just because it hasn't happened yet, should we just ignore it? And when it does happen, people will be running around going, only if I'd have known. After acquiring a telescope of his own, he studied the surface of the moon for weeks and went into ecstasies of joy. He even fulfilled a boyhood dream of writing one of the first science fiction stories in history, of the voyage to the moon and back. More than 2 generations before Newton, he simply took for granted that both the Earth and the moon had gravitational fields. Years later, Sir Isaac Newton proved this theory and then attempted to formulate the link between planetary forces and terrestrial events. In 1907, an American scientist, George Sutcliffe, also became interested in the idea. He advanced the notion that the planets affected the Earth by electrodynamic induction. It just keeps on getting worse. So the planets affected the Earth by electrodynamic induction, and they're installing all these systems like the 5G. Go look it up. It's much more than what you think. He predicted several large earthquakes and received a great deal of publicity and attention, but that then was forgotten. And there have already been accusations out there of these HARP systems causing possibly the earthquake off of Japan, earthquakes in China, plenty of people on videos seemingly trying to prove hurricanes with the sky spraying of chemicals and the electromagnetic waves you can see in the sky were steering the storms, even enhancing the storms. What is the truth? Isaac Newton, who followed in Kepler's footsteps, believed that there was profound logic in the latter's correlations. He was convinced that because points of intersection of certain world lines did change due to precession, orbital, and diurnal revolutions, and because man, by reason of his geographical location, altered the couplings of his personal field. So you are programmed when you're born by the electromagnetic position of planets and constellations, and apparently further changes as time goes by, the different changes, apparently can have an effect on us, giving us better days or worse days, stronger days or weaker days, healthy days and sick days, and maybe even days when we're destined to die. So what of that of the earth, planets, stars, there occurred all the changes men designated as events. This was extraordinary reasoning in view of the fact that electricity was then virtually unknown, while the human electrical field was merely a fiction. All right, I'm going to try to finish this up. I got 9 minutes to go. This paragraph is called More Winds of Evil. Galileo shared his enthusiasm for telescopes and experimental physics in his correspondences with Kepler. He lived in Florence, which was the heart of European culture, so his early environment was far better than that of his Bavarian friend. So Kepler was up there in the Bavarian area. As professor of mathematics at the University of Padua, Galileo began seeking the truth in nature. He rebelled at the dogmatic ideas and at those who believed that truth could be found in dusty old manuscripts. It isn't just clear where he began probing into ancient prophecies and astrology, but at the birth of each of his children, Galileo cast their horoscopes. He was consulted regularly by relatives, friends, and colleagues for interpretations of their horoscopes, and wrote a great deal of astrology under a pen name. Like Copernicus, he believed that something in the air changed with the geometric relationship of the Earth and the planets. This something caused changes in the behavior and emotions of all living creatures, especially man. Are you hearing me? Again and again and again, these people throughout history realized that the changes in the electromagnetic field, the gravitational fields, affected the behavior and emotions of all living creatures, especially man. It's page 37. And they're putting out this 5G system in a rush. The clock is ticking. They're trying to bring World War III to a start, or some cataclysmic event to bring us the new age and new world order. The preparations have been done. The FEMA camps are built. Legislation has been passed. Jade Helm 15, the exercises have taken place. 911 has been done. A lot of places in the Middle East have been overthrown. The satanic Luciferic symbolism is in the TV programming, the news, everywhere. Billboards. Justification for his idea is found in the example of Föhn in Switzerland, a warm, dry wind that brings an explosion of extreme restlessness and senseless crime. So certain winds from certain directions, which would ionize the air, can do this. They control the weather with HAARP and Gwen and dumping chemicals in the sky. They know what they're doing, in my opinion. And along the northern Mediterranean, broad-minded courts impose exceptionally light sentences for crimes that take place during the Sirocco, a wind that blows from the Libyan desert and brings in its wake a sharp upswing in the crime rate. Who would have thunk you'd have found this in a horoscope book? But apparently, gravitational forces, electromagnetic forces, ionization, all things that can be created artificially, controlled with all these electromagnetic systems they're installing everywhere, and everybody is warning us on the YouTube videos, alternate websites. Even Dr. Marcola, a health guru, and so many others. Are they warning us justifiably? Should we just ignore it and wait till it happens? I guess we'll have to check our horoscope and see what's predicted for tomorrow. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.